In the last years, I've been working or developed an interest in the technology and the trade of coursewares. And as the title suggests, potter skill and practice. As you all know, also the coursewares, there's a lot of skill involved in producing these wares. And I think here in the UK has a very long tradition in fabric analysis, and it's been shown in numerous case studies that this ware was distributed supra-regionally in other places of the Roman Empire or the eras. This is not the case yet, and that's why I would like to focus on South and Central Europe today. The cut-off date for the period is a bit straight. Of course, it is around roughly between 50 BC, AD 50, but that's of course based on the case studies. And it's a project that I will start in September at the University of Padua, so it's very early days. That's also why it's also an early period we're focusing on, but of course in time I will extend the chronology a little bit. Before I say a bit more about the project, I just wanted to do a recap on how it came into being. It was a colleague from the University of Innsbruck who did his PhD on the typomorphology of courseware in Roman Noricum. Roman Noricum, the boundaries is this dashed line really. So it coincides roughly with modern Austria, I would say. It covers most of it. Then we have a bit of southwestern Germany, we have northern Italy, and also Slovenia there. In his PhD, this colleague really looked at, as I said, at the typomorphology, the chronological evolution, but also looked at decorative motifs of the coursewares. And he proposes that there are interactions in different regions. We have the northwest, we have the southwest, northeast, southeast, and he proposes different connections between different regions depending on the pottery. So, for instance, he sees a very tight link or a tight network between the northwest and the southwest, and that's based on a jar, a nicely decorated jar that occurs only in this part of Noricum. And he sees other connections for this type of tripods in the south, so the southwest and the southeast, then in this case based on the shape. It's also the grey marks, the grey squares you see are essentially the sites where you find these tripods on. We have a few here in the northwest, but I should say there are very few. So it is really an area here in the south where they mainly occur, and this is also the pottery I'd like to focus on today. He proposes these connections based on the movement of potters. So. And I think it's an interesting hypothesis to think that it's potters who move and intermarry and move into other potters' communities. This is, of course, an option, but I think if we consider that, we should also consider the option that the pots themselves moved. And for this, we need fabric analysis, or at least that's what I would suggest. After he finished his PhD, he got a little pot of money to analyze these types of tripods compositionally. These wheel-thrown tripods, they are completely wheel-thrown, both base and the ball themselves, and they are the base is attached in the later phase and then cut, like you have these wedge-shaped feet. So these balls occurs in the 1st and the 2nd century AD in our study area, and he asked colleagues at the University of, not the university, in Berlin to do the chemistry, the bulk chemical analysis, and he asked me to do the petrography. I'll quickly show the results. On the right, we did the analysis separately, independently, let's say. Luckily, the results corresponded, not always straightforward. But what did we find? And sorry, I forgot to mention, but he actually, the colleague took the samples from several municipia here, so the Roman towns that developed from the mid-1st century AD. And what we found was that actually at most of the sites, and now I will mainly talk about the part that I did with the geologists from the University of Innsbruck, we found that at most of the sites these bowls, these tripod bowls, were produced locally. It's a very complex geology. We're not talking geology. I was also very happy to be working with them because we have a mixture of different kinds of inclusions in there, different works inclusions. But in any case, we were close enough to propose that we have local production at each of these municipia, but we also had 2 fabrics that were distributed within the region. So we had a supra-regional distribution for 2 of these bowls. This said, let me go back here. It's actually one of the first studies within the region that proposes that we have a supra-regional production, because the main idea is that everything was produced locally and distributed locally, but it's also because very few fabric analyses have been done. And I should also mention that there are very few kiln sites found. We have several workshops in Salzburg, so the Roman Juvavum, and we have some in Chelea in the southeast. So then we are in Romania. Quite recently one came out here, but actually very few evidence for kilns. So that gives you the idea that maybe there are no workshops. No, they have not been found, but of course it doesn't help to think about the productions and the distributions, also if you don't do fabric analysis. So that prompted me to think a bit more about these tripod bowls, and I started looking into them, and I think there were 2 good reasons to really start a project on this. One is that actually in the early 2000s a compositional study, quite a detailed compositional study, was done on these pots. They are called Auerberg pots because Auerberg was the site where a main production was found, and we are in Bayern, southern Germany. And you see, it was mainly chemical analysis, and what we want to take from there today is that at the Magdalensberg, so one of the sites we will focus on later on, these Auerberg pots, they only come in 2 fabrics. They come in a marble tempered fabric and in a quartz sand tempered fabric. Now, these pots, they also occur in this area 50 BC, 50 AD, and they occur actually in the entire region, northern Italy, southern Noricum and Slovenia, so roughly the same area where we have our tripod bowls. And I think it was an important study because we are here at this late Iron Age, early Roman period, where we see actually a very specialized production that has a very wide distribution. So this idea of local production distribution that was in sort of household mold, it doesn't hold on the basis of this. And I wanted to bring it up because among these Auerberg pots from the Magdalensberg, we have a few of these tripod bowls that were also analyzed. But we'll come back to these in a minute. The other reason why I wanted to focus more on these bowls is that the wheel-shaped version that I've looked at is actually a successor of a handmade version, which is, I think, very well known to you, or at least the publication that really looked at this type of vessel in depth by Vivian Swan was very well studied. So here the bowl itself was probably handmade and perhaps wheel finished, but the base wheel thrown. So it's a very complex manufacturing technique for this cooking vessel. And of course, the publication doesn't need to be introduced to you, but Vivian Swan clearly showed that this type of tripod was distributed very widely in the Roman Empire. This tripod cuisine was part of the soldiers who then moved with the army, starting within Noricum, but then going along the Danube north and also east to Roman Dacia. So I think these were 2 good reasons for sort of looking at this vessel in more depth and proposing to do an in-depth technological study and perhaps also look at trade. Yes, this is what I wrote in the proposal with the 4 aims. I have to admit a little bit of ambitious, perhaps. The main thing, yes, of course, I want to study the pottery wastes that we have, to know that technology, to know what is produced where, and then also combine this with tripod bowls from a number of consumption sites in the region to then start looking at trade patterns. I would say these are the first 2 objectives. Let's, for now, leave the 3rd and the 4th. You know, we'll see about those, whether these are feasible. What I've been doing so far, the idea is to focus on the civilian sites. So I think, if I reflect a bit on what Vivian Swan wrote, there was more of a focus on the military there, but she also mentions that some of these sites, although there was military presence, there were also trading centers. And if we look at the core of Noricum in Austria, then of course Magdalensberg is the key site. It is in the area of Virunum, because Magdalensberg, after its 100 years of existence, was then abandoned, and everybody moved, or the town moved to Virunum. So that's the starting point. It is really a key site in Noricum. So my idea is to focus on the tripod bowls from this area, and kiln sites we have here and in Juvavum, as I've mentioned before, but as I said, mainly civilian sites, just to see whether we find out more things than has been suggested by Vivian Swan. Another thing that she mentioned is that this tripod cuisine is not part of the Italian tradition, in the northern Italian tradition, and of course she's right about this, but nevertheless I wanted to have a look at some sites in northern Italy to see what's going on there, because, and now I'm going too fast because I wanted to say something about the methodology. It's mainly a compositional study, so fabric analysis with detailed scientific techniques. They have a lot of facilities in Padua, and I'm really looking forward to that. But essentially, thin section petrography will be the main basis, comparison with geology, of course, and some bulk chemistry. Other techniques are used more sparingly, just to see what we can say about firing temperature, or something new, what I think might be interesting is what is called the SANS technique. It is a non-destructive technique that focuses on the orientation of the voids, so that we can say something more about the forming. I think macroscopically I do my best, but I do feel there are quite some limits, at least for me, and so that will be an important part of the method. As I said, rather scientific, but what I really want to talk about is the sites here. Yes, as I said, I wanted to have a look at northern Italy, because we have to take the history a little bit into account. Starting from the 1st, 2nd century BCs, of course, the Roman start to really take control of the northern parts of Italy. They found Aquileia at the time, and it is then mainly afterwards, under Julius Caesar, that some settlements start being developed going into the Alpine region. So we have some settlements. We have now Borgers that is being developed under Julius Caesar. We have Iulium Carnicum, and they are on important roads, on important passes into the Alpine regions. And I wanted to have a look at those anyway, just to see particularly what happened with the shapes in terms of forming. Because yes, they start being formed on the wheel in the 1st century AD, where you can think of an input from the Romans, but before that it is handmade. So I just wanted to see what's going on there. And it is true on sites like Iulium Carnicum in Aquileia, there are actually very few of these bowls, but nevertheless I asked for permission to the Superintendenza to analyze them. And these are sites that are very clearly dominated by Roman merchants. So we have a lot of presence of Roman material culture. We have inscriptions in Latin. So that is very clear that it's Roman settlements, Roman merchants that are dominating these sites. But there's always a few of these bowls, I suspect, maybe personal belonging, but we will see what comes out with the fabric analysis. And then we come in a really first Roman settlements into the Alpine region. So we are across the Alpine ridge, if you like. I've already mentioned Magdalensberg, our key site in Austria, for which Vivian Swan had already mentioned that yes, there is some military presence, but it was mainly a trading center. And this also counts for Gurina, which was located on the I would say the Austrian side of an important pass, starting from Iulium Carnicum, and then two other sites here, Carnium, now Portus, sites in modern Slovenia, sites what they all have in common that they are located on a top hill. They have either a natural defense or they had towers around them, and so they were well naturally defended. Some presence of military, albeit little, but mainly located on these very crucial points were important for Roman control, I would say, and for trade. And it is these sites it's a pottery from these sites that I'm currently sampling these days. If we begin with Magdalensberg, you see its location that's really dominating on a hill. It has numerous of these tripod bowls. To mention only the ones that have the potter marks, we have more than 600 individuals, and they still need publishing. So it's also in this sense quite an important site because it has this chronology from 50 BC to 50 AD. So I'll start with these, and I've been analyzing the first of the tripod bowls from Magdalensberg together with a colleague who had actually previously analyzed 3 of these, and they fall into these 2 groups. We have the marble tempered group, and we have a quartz tempered group. Now, when it comes to marble, with the colleague, we're looking at the geology. Yes, it is correct, and we are in a marble area. It is located, the first quarries are about 30 kilometers from the site. Also, with its location high on the hill, you cannot speak of a local production. And when it comes to the sand tempered, actually, if you look at the inclusions, yes, you have some sand in there, but it is really a mixture of rock inclusions with sand. And also, they are quite rounded, and we have some rare minerals in there that we can't see through because of the dark matrix, that seem to suggest that we're looking at a river sediment. And again, we are then quite a bit south. It's probably the Drau River. So we can't really say it's local production, we think, but we will have to carry out the raw material sourcing. For the Gurina, I have to admit, I haven't seen the material yet. The meeting, the appointment is later in the month, but just judging by the drawings, we have the same type of bowls again with the typical rilling. And why I suspect that we have a similar fabrics is that the lids, because I'm sorry, I forgot to say, of course, these tripod bowls, they came with lids. The decoration is the same. So I suspect we will be seeing the same fabrics at the Gurina as we have currently at the Magdalensberg.
2 minutes.
Yes, and then that's perfect. For the last 2 sites in Slovenia, I can be very brief. Carnium has an even shorter living span, so to say, so roughly 50 years. It is really abandoned early on. But now Portus, where I was last week, we have quite a high number of these tripod bowls. It was very important. We have a marketplace with various storehouses and taverns. So it was really a center for trade, for transport. And I took the first samples there. We also have the graffiti there. And again, there I saw, but I know I don't have a picture, you have to trust me. We have again a marble temper fabric. So what I suspect is going on in these 4 early sites, so Martalinsberg, Gurina, but also Carnium and now Portus, is that there is a regional exchange, regional trade of the similar vessels that are produced in 1 or 2 fabrics that were probably produced somewhere here along the Drau. I'm not saying that it is one production site. We'll have to find out about that, and we'll have to compare with some raw materials that we sample. But there is a general idea how things had to be done. The vessels look very similar. They're always made in the same way, and they seem to be tempered in a similar way. So there is some exchange, there is some transfer of knowledge, if you like, among the potters in this very early phase. This said, it stops around 50 AD when the region, Roman authorities consolidated, and what happens then, starting from the mid-1st century AD onwards, is something I will hopefully tell you in a few years from now. Thank you.